Talking CRM with Jeff and David, getting the best value for the whole organization from your integrated CRM and accounting systems. David Beard, CRM Principal, and Jeff Richards, Head of Training Program Development for Sage CRM, spend time chatting with customers, resellers, and others about Sage CRM in action around the globe. In this episode, we continue the conversation with Danny Lewis of Qmulus Solutions in the UK, as we talk about the technical trends and conversations about bridging skills gaps, people and management processes that make CRM successful, both at the beginning of an implementation and the long-term ownership of the product.
You've been outlining the add-ons or starting to talk about the add-ons that you have, and obviously very important integration that you're able to provide with the accounting products. When you think about the general technological environment that we're working, what are the most important horizon technologies that are coming down the road?
Some of the benefits of containers, products like Docker, etc., and also sort of hyperconvergence. For example, people don't realize that software is being, or even websites are being run in isolated containers. Ability to do that and isolate your data, but actually maintain the same underlying operating systems and hardware in the background is really going to become a bigger thing than it already is.
And you're thinking there in terms of the experience of working within virtual private clouds, I guess, or are you thinking in terms of the implementation of accounting systems as well as the implementation of CRM?
All of the above, really.
All of the above.
Yeah. If you can imagine a user logging into Sage CRM, but rather than them logging onto a website, what they're actually doing is spooling up a container that holds their sessions changes to that particular set. The underlying database stays the same, but they run in their own isolated container session rather than just logging onto a web page. It means that you can actually manage, load balance those sessions around different virtual hardware through hyperconvergence rather than actually having to manage it as a traditional website application. And it means that you can, for example, move compute, storage and memory between both an online hosted system or a local back-end application server, depending on load. So, for example, if Sage CRM suddenly had 50 people log on, the system can automatically move the data storage and the database running into maybe a flash array so that it can serve data out. But once that load decreases, that can automatically be moved to a sort of more traditional spinning disk array, or RAM can be increased or decreased per user session, which allows you to actually spread your underlying technology stack. Or you won't be traditionally buying a server with 16 gigs of RAM and 4 cores and 100 gig hard drive. It's almost irrelevant. The underlying infrastructure scales per session.
A lot of what you were saying there, Danny, is I think will become invisible to our customers. It's not something that they're going to be thinking about directly. It is going to be part of the wallpaper of technology as we move on. But that gives a sense of change. We know we're moving in a very fast-moving technology environment. You've been working with Sage CRM as a technology family of technologies, because we don't have just the one technology inside Sage CRM. How has your experience of working and integrating with Sage CRM changed over those years?
As a technological product, whilst it stayed fairly similar, I'm going to use the Tomcat word now, but the addition of Tomcat to allow things like the interactive dashboards and some of the additional more modern features has actually, top of it, been really, really good in the way that Tomcat's actually used to generate various bits of functionality, exports or mail merging and stuff like that, has been great. And I think that actually should be used and expanded out in further detail. But also the ability for the technology in the front end, with the introduction of the new front end back in 2017 time, has been really good and really beneficial to the product and standardized the development in the front end.
If you're not familiar with the word that Danny used there, which is the Tomcat word, Tomcat is a part of the architecture of Sage CRM. We've got a hybrid architecture which combines aspects of a traditional IS API, all running on Internet Explorer type application, and then a separate technology stack which has introduced Java into the mix to make sure that all the modernization takes place within that environment. We are working with technology we are working with our partners who are working with account software as well as Sage CRM. When you think about the implementation process and you try and think about the experience of the customer in that implementation, what is the skills gap that you find most obvious when dealing with customers who are receiving an integrated Sage CRM and accounting system for the first time? What do you find you have to address in terms of education?
So obviously there's two sides of that. There's one is the skills gap at the customer side, and the other is sometimes the skills gap at the partner side. As I mentioned, one of the reasons why we started up at Qmulus is because we wanted to look at delivering CRM solutions differently to how the traditional account solutions are delivered. And so we skilled up with some very good people that allowed us to deliver CRM as business management solutions. And a lot of the time, these type products, you need an understanding of the actual business you're implementing it into, and that's where a skills gap on the customer side can come into play, because invariably people know that they want a CRM system. They've been using spreadsheets or notebooks, etc., and they're like, we need a CRM system. Or a salesperson has joined the company and gone, we need a CRM system, we haven't got something. So they go out, they start looking for CRM systems, they come across the usual suspects, and then at a certain point they decide they want to buy one. The issue then really becomes at some point along that process, and invariably that they start to really look at how this type of system is going to be implemented into their business and affected by their business. A lot of the time it's very much we don't know what it does, and so we don't know how it's going to benefit us as a business.
They don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so you can't blame them for that.
Sure.
That's just the way it is. That's with anything you buy. It's like a chicken and egg process sometimes, that you'll do something that someone asks, could we just have this, or we could just have that? So you implement it. Once they see it, they start to have an understanding of what the product does, and invariably that will change. So actually, before they go live or just after they go live, it's like, yeah, we didn't really understand how we'd use it at that point, so now we want it like this. So the issue there that comes around to who's going to pay for that, because obviously you've budgeted an amount of time in the project to deliver whatever's been discussed, and then any changes, unless you've got sort of quite tight change control process, invariably has a cost internally. And so whether that goes for the customer or you incur it yourselves is up for you as a business, but predominantly that generally gets incurred in the short term by the business partner.
So I understand that you've got to maintain a certain agility and a certain velocity when you are carrying out implementation, because you want to be able to deliver things within a fixed budget. You want to be able to manage customer expectations and do that. But I look at a lot of projects, especially from where I sit within the context of the level 3 support team and the work and seeing the issues coming up. I get a sense that there's probably a requirement to think of CRM systems as much more organic, that are constantly changing and constantly growing as an organization changes and grows, and the business that a company is in changes. So is that something that would lend itself much more to an iterative sense of development rather than a linear or waterfall type development and implementation?
Absolutely. But in our generalized way of implementing projects, we've always seen that there's kind of two types. There's the big bang approach with lots of scoping, lots of days, lots of discussion and documentation, and making sure that when it goes in, it's all been tested and And that they obviously are bigger projects, lots of cost involved, so lots of risk involved for the partner and for the customer, lots of testing, so the customer's going to have to spend a lot of time internally having cost associated against the project. But certain projects lend themselves and need that way to be implemented. But we always try initially to see if we can implement a fairly standard and similar out of the box solution for customers by really showing them what the core product does out of the box and showing them how it works, and then guiding them down via the use of spreadsheets, etc., with documentation, guiding them down a way of understanding how certain areas of the system works, what types of fields they need, and really just focusing on core stuff to get them up and running, tailoring the system with their terminology, adding fields and drop downs that match their classification for reports, and just helping them understand that a lot of the reason why you would have a CRM system is around the analysis of the data you're putting in. So if you have a specific set of reports for your sales director or reports to the manager, or you want to go through a certain process, they will require repurposing of existing fields or adding new fields that allow you to do that. And just if you focus on that as a core, and then get that launched into the system. At that point, you can then start to scale that up and add more and more functionality in.
So do you find then, Danny, because that's interesting that we come back to this idea that we help the customer evolve their thinking because they don't know what they don't know. Do you find, if you had to put a percentage on this, is it 70% of your customers you work that way with?
I would suggest on the very first implementation, so the first sale and engagement with that customer, it's probably up to 90 to 95% of our customers.
Goodness, wow. So is that a conscious decision on your behalf, as you say, to manage risk and expectations for customers as much as there's anything else?
Customers' perception of a successful project varies. Yep. It's understanding what those success points from the customer's side is, not from our side. Success from a partner would be, we've done it to scope, we've done it on time, and it's within budget. Right. The success of the customer is completely different. That might be that it's had user adoption. It might be that it's reduced their cost, or it might be that it's increased their sales, or it's just streamlined their marketing. So the expectation of what makes a successful project is completely different on both sides of the coin. And I think if you can limit down the amount of expected outcomes from the product, that not only reduces the cost of the implementation, but also some of the expectations. It means that the success of the project is easier on both sides. But at that point, we can almost flip that round the other way for the second or subsequent implementations or projects that we do for the customer. So once they've embedded in, invariably, the next set of customizations are actually scoped projects. It might be 5, 10, 20, 50-day projects. But at that point, they've bought into the product, they can see the benefits, and they really start to understand what they've spent their money on and what they can actually achieve out of the product. So when we engage in our sales cycles, we try to go down the route where we explain what they're going to get out of the box, but we also explain the possibilities that they can do either via third-party add-ons or via development, etc., so that they know that they're investing in a long-term product, which, whilst it might take more cost over a period of time, can grow with them and shape with them as a business. But in the short term, the measures for success are kept as small and as minimal as possible, so that the projects and the products accepted in the first phase. Because invariably, it's the first phase that CRM projects fail. Most people will look at the initial implementation and decide whether or not they see that as a success and whether or not they want to continue using that product or go elsewhere.
Next time, Jeff Richards takes over and talks about what Danny would like to see in Sage CRM's future. You've been listening to Talking CRM with Jeff and David, getting the best for the whole organization from your integrated CRM and accounting systems.